Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we're going to talk about what has unfortunately become a very popular topic of concern in Hampton, which is flooding. My guests are from the Emergency Management Office, Gwen and Hui-Shan Walker. Welcome.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
You know, it used to be that I think a lot of the flooding talk was specifically around hurricanes, and it's spread out now, and there's a lot of flooding incidences. And I want to acknowledge we're having this conversation fairly shortly after severe flooding in Louisiana in places that weren't in the flood zone and with people that didn't necessarily have flood insurance. Is this a problem in Hampton as well?
Well, we always encourage everyone to get flood insurance, whether you're in a flood zone or not. Hampton roads floods, you know, whether it's raining, tidal flooding, we're susceptible to it. And you may not flood in this event, you may flood in another one.
And it's hard to predict.
Absolutely. And sometimes there's no warning. And flood insurance
with
does.
With hurricane, we have some warning.
Right.
People can evacuate. But with one of those quick, there's a big storm sits on an area for 24 hours.
And it could be a severe thunderstorm that floods, you know, just rains and rains, and it's a short amount of water that we get. And so, but flood insurance really takes 30 days to go into effect. So if you purchase it today thinking the storm's going to come next week,
can't do it.
It will not be in effect. So, and if you're not in a flood zone, really it's more of a peace of mind. The cost really should not be very high. So.
Yeah. The cost is based on your risk.
Yes.
So if you're not in the flood zone, and I'm not, but I always buy it because, you know, I'm this close for one thing. Like I look at the little property line and, you know, you just never know. We are a very low-lying area. We do have hurricanes. We do have storms. We have waterways that have been filled in over time and really don't have the capacity that they used to have. And obviously we're working to fix all those things, but you don't fix 400 years of development really quickly.
And we're a coastal community, so it only makes sense for everyone to have flood insurance.
And, you know, people don't like necessarily to talk about the science, but we do know the land is going down, subsiding or going down, and the waters are rising. Whether you want to call it whatever you want to call it, it is happening.
Yes.
It is a long-term thing. It's not, you know, we're not that much more dangerous today than we were a year ago, but in the long term, it's causing us concerns. So.
The number one community in the country at risk for the land subsidence and sea level rise is New Orleans. The second most at risk is Norfolk, Virginia.
Hampton Roads, I know, it's
Absolutely.
really scary. And I think there's some long-term things that may or may not, I mean, HRSD has this cool idea that might help reduce the land subsidence, but yeah, wow, it's going to take a while. No matter what we do to try to turn this around or to try to adapt to it, because you can't necessarily turn around a global trend.
But we got to work together as a community, and everyone has to have their part. And so we're working on projects and initiatives throughout the city.
So homeowners' part is to get flood insurance.
Yes, absolutely. And there's many people in Hampton that don't have it. It's not required. Their homes are paid for. If the mortgage isn't requiring it, they're not purchasing it. But homeowners does not cover flooding damages.
Right.
We've seen too much, and like you said, in Louisiana, a lot of folks did not have flood insurance.
Didn't occur to them.
And so rebuilding is going to be a challenge for them.
So we have some homes in Hampton that have experienced repeated flooding, and the federal government has some money available. But it's a long and complicated process, right, to get homes elevated.
Yeah, it's not months, it's years. So it's generally 2 to 3 years that we count on for federal grants to be able to go from the time of application to actually being into construction. We're just completing the third house of the first project that we undertook.
Because you guys, I'm sorry to say, you guys have been talking about this for a long time. Like, I have heard years ago that, you know, we had homes in the pipeline, that we had approval, but government moves slowly, and it's costing more, which means we're helping fewer people because of the higher cost for some of these home elevations than was projected, right?
Right.
Yes.
The bids are coming in Hampton roads, what FEMA's terming astronomically high. So we're doing everything we can to try to affect that, to have more competition in the bid process, attract more contractors. This last bid that we just have open now that'll close next week. We actually advertised in New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland.
And you bundled it, so it was a big
did.
job, which might,
24 homes.
might bring in some people who'd
Yes.
be willing to stay and work for that amount of time, because it's got to be pretty major equipment to lift a house. It's not like, Bubba can do that from down the street.
It's very technical. It's easier to build a house from scratch than to elevate one. That's an engineering feat to do that.
So how do people qualify? Because I know there are people out there, and every time there's a story about a home being approved for home elevation, people say, oh, I've had a problem, I want to be approved. What are the steps that people need to take if they're interested in this option?
The first thing is to contact us. Contact the Office of Emergency Management. Our contact information's on the city website, and let us see if you qualify. There's no cost to you. It's just a little bit of time. The main thing we have to have, though, is an elevation certificate. In order to be able to determine your risk, we have to know what your floor elevation is, and that's only found on the elevation certificate. With that, we can determine whether or not you qualify.
How do you get an elevation certificate?
An elevation certificate you may already have in your closing paperwork if
Okay.
you've bought the house
So you gotta
probably
dig
within the last
through.
10 years.
Okay.
Otherwise, it may have been required by your flood insurance. You can check with your agent to see if they have one on file. And if not, then you would actually have to purchase one, and that could run you between $300 and $500
So
generally.
you need a survey kind of a thing.
It's a
Okay.
surveyor.
Okay.
And-
All right, so that's step one.
Step one. And then step two, we have to find a funding source. There's really two grant programs. One's an annual grant program, and it really targets severe repetitive loss properties. We have about 83 of those in Hampton. So you have to really be one of those to qualify generally. And then we have the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is dependent
one I
upon a
heard about.
presidentially declared disaster. So we
that's
only
a
get
pot
to
of money that only becomes available when
Yes.
something big happens.
Right.
Correct. But it can be anything that occurs in the state. It doesn't have to be something that impacts us. Right now, we're working an application for the snowstorm.
For flooding.
That's going to blow my mind. I
Well-
don't understand how you can go through
There's
this
money,
and
and
figure
we
these
do.
things out. And
We love the challenge, and the other is we're looking for funding sources, and so one of the funding sources out of the 24 homes was from the Louisa earthquake. Didn't really affect us, but so much.
there was so much money available.
Right.
They didn't use it for the earthquake.
So we're going to
Exactly.
use it for flooding.
Exactly.
You guys are smart. Like, you really dig through stuff to find these opportunities to help families right here in Hampton.
We have
Absolutely.
to, because if you hear these stories
Oh my
of these
gosh, yeah.
families and what they've been through, we work hard for them, and then there's a reason we do.
Now, that's what you guys are working for. But what you're telling me is that the criteria for the program is less about helping families and more about a federal investment, because they're spending more on repairing damages than they're. So it's really about the federal government and the federal flood insurance program coming out ahead. They don't hear the stories that you guys hear. They don't know the people that you guys sit across from and work through this. They're looking at the dollars and cents of the cost of elevating versus the cost of what the next flood is going to
Cost
be.
them.
Right. It's all about saving money to the National Flood Insurance Program.
Which makes sense, but it's also kind of
It misses the human factor.
it does.
So we have to show for every application, for every home that we put in, that for every dollar we spend, we're going to save $1 or more for the National Flood Insurance Program. So that means first you have to have flood insurance to qualify for any of these grants. And then after that, we have to show that
You have to have
we're
it and
gonna save
keep
money.
it during.
Have it and keep it. Have it and keep it. And a lot of people look at these grants and they say, why on earth would you be spending $200,000, $250,000 to elevate a home? And maybe that home's only worth $200,000. But if you look at the numbers that FEMA's looking at, we may be projecting that we're going to spend $450,000
on
in
the
flood
next two
insurance
time
claims.
floods, right?
Right.
And we also have.
So it's weird. I mean, I don't want to say weird criteria, but it's very specific criteria, and you guys are helping people through the process, and you're finding the money, and you're being the middleman and making it all happen, but you don't set the criteria. You don't even pick the people. I mean, you fill out the application with them.
And
but
it's
you don't
voluntary.
decide
This
who
is a
gets the
voluntary
money.
program, so some homeowners don't want to participate, you know.
Well, they have to pay a cost. They have to pay a portion of the cost, right?
Yes.
And some people, you know, may not have
And it
that.
depends if it's a severe repetitive loss property. Right now, there are grants that have what's called 100% federal funding, but that doesn't mean it's without cost to the homeowner. The homeowner still has to pay for a place to stay for 2 to 3 months, and there's other costs that could come in. If the homeowner's repetitive loss, it's a 90%, 10% match.
God, that's still a good deal.
the
I mean,
homeowner
really,
would
if
pay
you can,
10%.
You've
That
still
could be,
got to come up with some portion.
yeah,
but
that
it's-
could be
And
$20,000.
let's face it, the next time they flood, they've got to live somewhere for a while the repairs are going on. So
That's true.
And we also have the city home loan program, so that if folks don't qualify for any of the federal grants and they want to do it on their own, it's a low interest loan, very low, tied to the Treasury, and the rates are so low now, but that they can do their own elevation themselves to prevent
and that
future
does
flooding.
help because that at least gives people some sense of empowerment rather than waiting to see where they are
Right.
on the federally determined scale. But
In
it would
addition to
cost
that,
them
it
more.
doesn't have to be a full elevation. These grants that we apply for, you would have to elevate the whole house. But if you only want to elevate your utilities or you only want to install flood vents,
That's true.
then you could access the home loan program and do that without being out of
I
pocket
didn't realize
cash.
that. I thought it was strictly elevation
No,
because
any
things like
mitigation type
flood
activities.
vents or moving your AC up higher, all those things can also save you on your
Right.
flood insurance.
We have a
because-
lot of houses in Hampton that are above the base flood elevation, but they don't have the proper venting. And it may just be that the garage isn't vented, and that could be costing them hundreds, even up to $1,000
their
in flood
insurance.
insurance they wouldn't have to pay.
So they could get it back. So for them, that would make a lot of economic sense because
Return on
you'd have to
investment.
come up with money. Well, you don't have to come up with money up front since it's a loan, and you'd have a good ROI, as they call it in the business world.
That's right.
So my head is spinning. I don't know how you guys deal with all these details, all this paperwork, all the time. So what is, like, somebody who's listening to this going, oh my gosh, A, there's a possibility, and B, I don't understand what they just said.
Give us a call.
Give us a call.
We walk them through it and we explain it, and we talk to them, and every situation is different, every homeowner is different, and so we really believe in personalizing it as we work through. And we want to help everybody, and I wish we had an open pot, but we actually don't, and it makes it challenging. But when we use FEMA's criteria, that takes, we don't decide who. It's based on those numerical numbers. It's black and white whether they qualify or not.
There's forms that you have to fill out, and we've even sat down with homeowners and helped them fill out the forms. We've delivered the forms to them. We've met in the evening time or on weekends with them so they don't have to disrupt their work schedules. We really will bend over backwards to help them through the process.
That is awesome. So the 3 homes that are completed, tell me how those homeowners feel. How have they reacted?
The first home that we completed is in the Buckrow area, and we were just out there recently, and the homeowners said they can sit on their deck now and just take a sigh of relief that this hurricane season is upon us, and they said, we're not that worried about it. Now, if something were to happen, they know they still have to leave their home.
Right,
The area
right.
is still going to flood, but when they get back, their things aren't going to be wet.
Everything won't be wet and soggy and need to be ripped out and put on the street and starting all over.
And they had been through this so many times. They said, what a relief. Just
But the challenges through it, I mean, it's the emotions up and down, the challenges as you find things.
Oh, geez, you could be on the list
being
and then
moved out.
flood before it happens.
Yeah,
I'm sure
absolutely.
people have.
Yes,
actually.
absolutely.
those particular homeowners, some of the challenges, we found when we started to elevate the house that they had termite damage. An entire wall had to be
And the flood insurance
reframed.
program isn't going to pay for that part.
That's correct.
So there
That's
can be some surprise costs.
Yeah, that was a pre-existing condition. When we started to excavate their footings, we found groundwater problem and had to undercut. So there's all kinds of things that that bring challenges, but we work through every one of them.
Well, Gwen, so you've looked at specifically who these people are, where they live. What are some of the areas of the city that have had people qualify so far? You mentioned Buckrow.
I mentioned Buckrow and Grandview. Certainly, we still have some houses in Grandview and Buckrow that are slab houses, so there's no crawl space. There's no, measure of protection there. Off of North King Street, Roan Drive, West Gilbert, certainly we see a lot of problems in that area. Along Chesapeake Avenue, Harbor Drive, Powhatan Parkway area, we have a good bit of homes over there that qualify as well.
Any in like Pasture Point or along that Pembroke
We do.
corridor?
We have some on River Street and through that area as well in Pasture Point.
I think as people in the neighborhood see this going on, they might kind of wake up and think that there's an option that they might be able to take care of too. If their neighbors have gone through it and survived and have a house that is much more resilient, it might spark other people. Because I'm sure you've mailed forms to people who haven't
Every year.
haven't
Every
mailed
annually.
back that
It's an
don't
annual.
respond. So
And we already have had reactions to the ones that we've had raised. As I said, we're finishing the third. And I think part of it is that people now realize, yes, it can happen
It can
because
happen.
the process is so long.
oh gosh, yeah. If you get on the list and nothing's happened in 3 years, your neighbors are like, why should I bother? It's not going to help me. But if they finally see it happen.
And we're trying to, we've been developing a process and a program since we both came a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years. And so that the program, the last homes that were elevated were in Isabel. So it was a big stretch. And so we were rebuilding and working through the process so where we can streamline, I think we're getting that process down and moving along. And so hopefully we can cut some of the time down. Can't guarantee it,
No,
but
and you
we're
can't
going to
really
try.
have the federal time, but the contractor time and the things that,
that we can control
We can
and try to
control.
manage, we're working towards that and putting checks and balances in place so that it doesn't drag on so long. So because we also have reporting requirements, and extensions, and they want to give it, they don't want to give it, but it doesn't. FEMA just it takes them time to review everything.
Yes, it
So.
does. Well, thank you guys. This is, really educational and really exciting to finally see the
It is.
results of some of
Yes.
these things. So I'm going to recap, see if I do this right. Number one, get flood insurance. Whether you live in an area where it's required, whether you've paid off your mortgage, whatever it is, get flood insurance. Number two, let the city know when you have damages, because if we don't know, we can't help qualify you, we don't send you the forms, all that sort of stuff. And three, if all this is causing you to think, it's too much for me to handle, give these guys a call, because they will help you through the process, they will let you know what your options are, and you may have options you don't know about. So it's worth a phone call. Is that good?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for watching, and good luck becoming more resilient in this low-lying community. Thanks for watching.